Hey, what's up, my Acers? It's Gamer Guy 7 Aces, and today I'm doing a special review of Captain America Civil War. Yeah, this is actually not a review. This is more going to be a comparison between Captain America Civil War and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Now, alright, this is going to be a lengthy video. It's going to be more of a rant and comparison. Now, okay, 2 years ago, this is kind of like the third movie review I've done. 2 years ago, I did one on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 back in May 2014. Then last year, I did one on Avengers Age of Ultron. Both movies came out by May. And Avengers Age of Ultron, a lot of people like that. A lot of people love that. A lot of people hate that. It's a mixed bag. But as for me, I still really love the movie. I still think it's better than Avengers 1. And I still stand by my opinion that I made on the movie last year. Unlike The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which my opinions have changed with that movie and I'm more disappointed in that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Captain America Civil War. Now, this movie also came May 6th, 2016, worldwide, well, in America. And I saw the movie yesterday, and that movie was awesome. Honestly, this has to be the best comic book movie. One of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. It was crazy. It's one of those rare movies that actually meet my expectations and almost exceed it. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite. I don't know if I like it more than if I love it more than Winter Soldier. I think it's slightly. I basically had to let it sink in more, but I think I love it more than Winter Soldier. So yeah. So a lot of people love this movie. It has one of the highest ratings of any MCU movie. It's currently sitting at a 91 or 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of people love it. Now there's always going to be some haters out there. There are some people who are trying to say that the movie isn't that good, or everyone is just writing Marvel, or it's a hype train or whatever. And I don't know what to say for those people. Now, the problem people had with Avengers Age of Ultron last year was that it was too much of a filler or whatever. No, it wasn't too much of a filler. A lot of people were upset at first when they watched the movie that it didn't set up to Civil War enough, or it didn't set up to Thor Ragnarok enough. And now I'm hearing people complain about the opposite thing. And I'm hearing people complain that Age of Ultron, it was too much of a build-up. And wait, but what weren't you guys upset that it wasn't much of a build-up? Now you're accusing it of being a build-up? Make up your mind. Now, I took my sister to see this movie, Civil War, and the first time she saw, she was laughing, clapping, especially during the ending, which was really dark. She was, very riveted by the emotional scenes. But by the time the movie was over, she was like, I don't so much like this movie. I was like, why? She said, it felt like it didn't need to happen. It felt fillery. It didn't feel like a real Avengers movie. All they did was fight each other. I told my sister, whoa, what movie did you think you saw? She said, isn't this an Avengers movie? I was like, no, this is a Captain America movie. So she thought it was an Avengers movie. So I had to show her the title was Captain America Civil War, not Avengers Civil War. And then my sister was like, oh, okay. Then she ended up loving the film. So you see how a title can really change things? That's why it was getting on my nerves when people were like, why is this called Captain America Civil War? It should be called Avengers. No, because this is not an Avengers movie. This is at its core, it's a Captain America story. The Captain America story arc from First Avenger all the way to Civil War with him and Bucky. That is the main core. If you see this as an Avengers movie, you might be disappointed because it's not a real Avengers movie. Even the villain is not because so far the tradition of the Avengers movies is there's always this big bad villain, and he has these hordes of enemies like Chitauri or the Ultron robots, and all the Avengers had to unite and fight them. You don't want to watch an Avengers movie with the Avengers fighting each other, right? So yeah, as a solo movie, this is a great movie. And I have to say, Captain America Civil War is I think the Captain America trilogy is the first trilogy in comic book history that gets better at every sequel. And the third movie is great. Yes, this also applies to The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight trilogy couldn't even accomplish that. Batman Begins was really good. The Dark Knight was fantastic. Dark Knight Rises was a mixed bag. Some people liked it, some people didn't. I liked the movie a lot, but it did have its plot holes, and I didn't so much like the plot of how Bruce Wayne wasn't Batman for 8 years. So I kind of had problems with the plot and how convenient it was. I don't need to get into that. But Captain America Civil War is just so good. This has to be my top number one superhero trilogy as a whole, followed by Dark Knight trilogy. But all right, let's get straight into the list. I made 16 key points on why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and Captain America: Civil War are very similar to each other and why they should be compared. It's kind of crazy now seeing people from like Marvel haters to fanboys or DC fanboys trying to complain, saying no, people shouldn't be comparing, Captain America: Civil War with Batman v Superman. They're not alike. Yes, they are. They are alike. I personally did not like Batman v Superman at all. I thought it was a debacle. Almost reminded me of Batman and Robin. It was trying to be too dark, but at some points with Lex Luthor sticking a Jolly Rancher in that dude's mouth, it was just very cheesy. But I'm not going to. If you like the movie, that's more power to you. This is just to compare both movies and why Civil War did it better. So let's begin. I think I've talked enough. I mean, I've been talking for about 5 minutes, so let's get straight to it. Now, let's ask ourselves the main questions. Why Civil War and Dawn of Justice? Why are they so similar? It's because Marvel copied from DC. Let me explain. The Russo brothers in the interview, one thing I like about the Russo brothers is they're very honest. They're not pompous asses like Zack Snyder. The Russo brothers admitted that, yes, they were inspired to do Civil War. After they saw Batman v Superman, after they heard the idea that Warner Brothers and DC were going to make Batman v Superman, like way back in 2013, they were like, you know what? We should do Captain America Civil War because they're doing Batman v Superman. Now, Marvel was always going to do the Civil War storyline, but they were actually going to wait until much later when there's more characters in the cinematic universe. Like, we still haven't gotten Wasp yet. We still need Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, all that, and maybe even Wolverine. They're currently in talks with Fox to have Wolverine. They wanted to wait until later to add everyone in. But after hearing about Batman v Superman, they wanted to make Civil War Captain America's last movie. They were originally going to do Captain America Serpent Society. And as you guys know, in their press conference or whatever in 2014, they teased that title, Captain America Serpent Society, just as a joke to trick people. And I am so glad they didn't do Serpent Society. I always saw the Serpent Society as lame villains. I first saw them in Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the cartoon, and they're just all these snake-like villains. And I'm just so glad I'm just so glad they didn't adapt that into a movie. That would have been just bad. So I like it how they did Civil War, and I was like, oh crap, that means Spider-Man's going to be in this movie. So I was very excited for this. So yeah, if it wasn't for DC doing Batman v Superman now, we might not have gotten Civil War. So as much as I dislike that movie, I'm grateful that Batman v Superman exists. Because if we don't have that, we wouldn't have had Civil War. And I know a lot of you comic book fans might even get into more detail saying how a lot of Marvel characters were copied or inspired by DC characters. Like Deadpool was based off from Deathstroke, or Hawkeye was based off from Green Arrow. It's or how like Vision has some similarities with Superman. That's the thing. DC is older than Marvel. DC was created back before there was even a Marvel. Marvel was called Timely Comics when DC existed. Timely changed to Marvel, I think, in the 50s, or correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So, okay, so we're done with that point. So I have to thank Batman v Superman for existing. Now, number 2, the next simulator I'm going to talk about is Black Panther and Batman versus Spider-Man and Wonder Woman. Let me explain. Okay, both Batman v Superman and Civil War had 2 characters that had not gotten their solo movies yet. 2 new characters introduced in that movie that would later on get their solo movies. Batman. It's going to be a Batman solo movie now in 2018. Wonder Woman solo movie is coming out next year. Spider-Man's movie is coming out next year. And Black Panther's coming out 2018. So yeah, and Black Panther and Batman, they're very similar as they're both badasses. They both, kind of like vengeful characters. And yes, Batman is kind of vengeful in BvS. Kind of out of character, but that's the way Zack Snyder was going for in that movie. So I really saw him similar to Black Panther. And they were both badass characters. I love Batman. I mean, I didn't love him. I liked his character portrayal in the movie. I thought he was out of character sometimes. I didn't like how he was killing people, but I did like that Batman. I still prefer Christian Bale's Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy, but Batfleck's Batman definitely had the better fight choreography. And Black Panther was just awesome, so I don't need to get into that. Now, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman are also similar as they had the less amount of time, but the time they had was awesome. When Wonder Woman was fighting Doomsday, wasn't that awesome? That was pretty cool, I must admit. And Spider-Man in the whole airport battle, that was kick-ass. That was awesome. That was honestly the best action scene I've ever seen. Like, I mean, I knew it was going to be great, but I didn't know it was going to be that great. And I heard people saying, "Oh, this is going to be a cool scene. This scene is one of the best action. Is the best action scene in a superhero movie." Some people, like John Campea in a Collider movie talk, said that is the best action scene or one of the best action scenes he's ever seen in his life. I was like, wow, that's a bit of a huge statement to make. But after seeing it, I can definitely say this is one of my top three action superhero scenes ever. Like, my other two is like the car chase in The Dark Knight. You know, the car chase between Batman and the Joker when Batman was trying to save Harvey Dent. That was a kick-ass scene, and a lot of us were applauding at that. The other one was the train fight scene in Spider-Man 2 between Spider-Man and Doc Ock. At the time, that was a kick-ass scene, and it still is. So those are my top three scenes: the airport scene in Civil War, the airport battle, the Dark Knight chase scene, and Spider-Man 2 train scene. I mean, I can't even think of another big action set piece in the MCU that is as big as the airport. Like, that was just awesome. Seeing 11 superheroes, seeing the Avengers, everyone, and newcomers, Ant-Man and Spider-Man and Black Panther duke it out. That was just amazing. Like, it was awesome, you know? And yeah. Our next point I want to make is the third point. The death of Superman versus the character assassination of Captain America. Now, I know you guys will be like, what are you talking about, gamer guy? Nobody died in Civil War. Yeah, nobody. In the Civil War comics, Captain America actually died. He was shot by Crossbones. But in this movie, he didn't die. Crossbones was actually killed rather early in the movie, much to my surprise. But the similarities I'm going to compare is how, okay, in Batman v Superman, Superman died, obviously. He was killed by Doomsday. In this movie, even though Captain America didn't die, his character definitely died. Like, that was the one thing I disliked in the movie. Like, I mean, I didn't think it was bad. It was a great scene to even move me emotionally. Like, I hated Captain America's character by the end. I understood that he was, fighting to, protect his friend, and his friend was a victim and all this, but man, he was quite selfish at the end. I was feeling for Tony Stark when he saw that footage of his parents dying. It was like that was the dark. I think that's one of the darkest moments in the entire MCU. I was rooting for Iron Man to at least seriously injure Bucky, and then Captain America should intervene, but Captain America was just blocking, Iron Man every step, and even like at that end, like, Captain America, he didn't seem like a hero anymore. He didn't seem like a Boy Scout. He was just protecting his friend out from selfish reasons because his friend was basically the only connection he had with his past since Peggy died. And Tony Stark was like, "You don't deserve that shield. My father made that shield." And Captain America was like, "Yeah, you're right." And then he just dropped the shield. Like, that is when his character died for me. He was no longer Captain America. So in a sense, that was symbolically the death of Captain America, because as you can see, he's no longer Captain America. He's going to be working in the shadows now and hiding. And I think we won't be seeing him don the shield or the mantle until Infinity War. So that was a really powerful scene. More powerful than the death of Superman, which felt very forced. I mean, come on, let's be honest, guys. That was too early to kill off Superman. I seriously thought they would save Doomsday for like the third Man of Steel movie, or even the second one at least. But they killed him off in the second DCEU movie. Just, I don't know, for shock value. It's crazy. And some people are like, oh, they just killed him on purpose, so when he comes back, he'll be a better man, a better person, and will understand human mortality. That's really just reaching. Zack Snyder never stated that. Zack Snyder stated the reason why he killed Superman is so that Batman could be the one to recruit the Justice League. He said because if Superman's around, there won't be any need for Batman. So he wanted to kill off Superman so Batman could be the one to get everyone together. Basically, he's basically riding on Batman. Like, you can tell the dude does not like Superman at all. He wants Batman to be the star. When really, like, wasn't it Martian Manhunter? Correct me if I'm wrong, DC fans, but wasn't it Martian Manhunter that established the Justice League? I always saw Martian Manhunter as like the Nick Fury of the Justice League. Having Batman be the star and get everyone together was just super lame to me. There won't be any need for Superman anymore. So that was just forced. And knowing that the only reason why Zack Snyder did that was to favor Batman means he really didn't give a damn about Superman. And whereas Captain America, even though I didn't like his character at that point, His character assassination was much more meaningful. I understood where he was coming from, even though I didn't agree with him. And when his character was assassinated, basically, his symbolically, when he gave up the mantle, that was much more meaningful because we've grown up with these characters for years now. All right, the next point I want to talk about is the Sokovia Accords versus the news banter in Batman v Superman. Let me explain. Now, the Sokovia Accords was basically the government's response to regulate and, register these superheroes, monitor them. That was the whole theme of this movie. Like, you Avengers have been acting without any restraint. Innocent people are dying. Yes, you're saving the world, but the world can no longer tolerate your reckless actions, And the news banter, basically in DC, they were complaining about how Superman is this omnipotent being. And yes, he's protecting people, but at what cost? He's killing many people and he's not of this world. Should we be fearful of him? Should we? So I did like that, but that's all it was amounted to. It was just reduced to just news clips. That was the most meaningful part of the whole movie, Batman v Superman, just the news clips. They were just talking about it. There wasn't any doing, Whereas in Civil War, there was doing, like there was two factions. Iron Man, who supported the Sokovia Accords and wanted the government to regulate the Avengers' actions, and Captain America, who wanted them to be free, make their own decisions, and not be, a tool for the government. And that really was not explored at all in Batman v Superman, much to my dismay. That clip where they showed that red-headed lady, the senator, when Superman, submitted himself to court, I thought that was going to be a cool scene where Superman was going to have to work for the government, kind of like in the Dark Knight Returns, and, to prove to them that he can be trusted. That didn't happen in the movie at all. That shit only lasted for like 2 minutes, and then Lex Luthor blew everything up. So it was like, so what is all this? It didn't make sense, The most thing I can remember from that movie is the nightmare sequences. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is Baron Zemo versus Lex Luthor. Baron Zemo versus Lex Luthor. Now, both of these villains are very similar, not only because they're human beings, but another thing is that, okay, one thing I do have to admit is Marvel, the cinematic universe, they have had some really lame villains. Their villains have been really crappy. They have not been good. They've been very cliche, like Yellow Jacket and Ant-Man, or even Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, Marvel does not do good villains. Like that's a fact. Whereas DC, they've had the Joker, they've had Bane. Even if you didn't like Bane that much in Dark Knight Rises, he was a good villain. His lines are memorable. I like, do you feel in charge? Or like, oh, you think you've adopted the dark? I was born in it. I know all his lines. I can't tell you a single line from any villain in the MCU except maybe Ultron, from the trailers and stuff. That being said, people forget about the villain Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman. He was atrocious. Nothing against Jesse Eisenberg. He's a good actor. But I don't know what Zack Snyder, I don't know what they were smoking on making him act like that. That was nothing like Lex Luthor. Now, don't get me wrong. Both Baron Zemo and Lex Luthor do not act like their comic book counterparts. See, I'm going to be fair in this video. I'm not going to favor. I'm going to tell it like it is. Baron Zemo in the movie was nothing like Zemo in the comics. If I'm going to, like, Zemo in the comics had like a sock over his head. And Lex Luthor, you already know Lex Luthor was different. But the thing is, Zemo was a better interpretation in the movie than Lex Luthor was. Lex Luthor was just this Joker who didn't really have any motive, good motive on why he was against Superman. I mean, he was just like, demons don't come from hell beneath us. They come from the sky. Just like Zack Snyder loves putting all these like proverbs and like biblical references. Like he's self-important. He tries to put the self-important movie and it doesn't amount to anything. There's no meaning behind it. Whereas in Civil War, you know exactly why Zemo does what he does. Like Baron Zemo, he wants to get back at the Avengers because he lost his loved ones, his family. His family died because of the Avengers' actions in Sokovia. So his whole plan is to destroy the Avengers. Like, that's why I think he's at first when I heard about Zemo, I was like, wait, why is there a villain in this movie? I always thought it was going to be Captain America versus Tony Stark or versus Iron Man. I was like, there does need to be a villain. He's just going to feel forced. And even coming to the movie, I still felt very negative about Zemo from what I heard, because everyone's like, oh, this movie is great. The only thing bad was Zemo. But after watching the movie and Zemo, I kind of like Zemo. I have to say I mean he's may not be my favorite villain obviously, but in context to this movie, I have to say he's one of the better villains in the MCU because he had complete motivation. He was just a man and he did what Ultron could not do. He did what Ultron was trying to do. Ultron said that I want to tear I wanted he wanted to Ultron wanted to tear the Avengers apart from the inside, just like what he told just like what he told Scarlet Witch. He's like, we can tear them apart from the inside, But he failed to do that. Matter of fact, all Ultron did was just, make some of them leave or retire. Like, Hawkeye retired, Hulk left, Iron Man retired, but all he did was help create a new Avengers team. Kind of like how Loki in Avengers, he wanted to destroy the Avengers too, but he only made them stronger. Loki was the one that got the Avengers together in the first place, just like in the comics. But Zemo did what Ultron and Loki could not do, and Zemo was just a human being. He was part of the I think police force or whatever, I forgot. But he was just so effective in what he did. Now a lot of people might say, "Oh, what he did was very convenient." It was it was so convenient, almost plot hole. You want to talk about plot holes? Let's talk about Lex Luthor and how he just planned everything together and he knew Batman's identity. It was never explained. Like Lex Luthor was pulling on the strings like Zemo, but Zemo's made sense. Lex Luthor didn't make any sense at all. And just, yeah, I mean, I can get into these characters, but I don't know. Just, I did not like Lex Luthor at all. I barely met anybody who liked Lex Luthor. But Zemo, I've been reading comics. People are like, you know what? I actually like Zemo a lot. And I'm glad they didn't kill him. Because that's the thing, Marvel. Marvel has a lot of problems of killing their villains, like what they did with Crossbones. I'll get into Crossbones later. But yeah, so I really like Zemo, and I understood his motive. Like, even though what he did was bad, I totally understood why he did what he did. Whereas Lex Luthor, he has absolutely no motive. He's just like, oh, I hate Superman. Superman is powerful. Let me get rid of him, And he kept flip-flopping. He was like, okay, I'm going to try to have Batman kill you. Okay, Batman won't kill you. I'm going to create this monster that I can't control, Doomsday, to kill you. I mean, come on. But yeah, so I really like Zemo. I have to say he's one of my favorite villains in the MCU only because, he did what Ultron couldn't do and I totally could relate to him. Next thing I want to talk about is the next similarity is Bruce Wayne's parents' murder versus Tony Stark's parents' murder. Now, both are very dark and both are basically catalysts in the movie. Like the movie, like Batman v Superman starts with the death of Bruce's parents, for the umpteenth time. This time it's in slow-mo, but yeah, you see that, it explains his parents' death. The beginning of Civil War also deals with Tony Stark's parents' death, but the thing is, at first, the average moviegoer doesn't know it. When I first saw that scene, I was like, that might be his father, and I was correct by the end. So, it starts with the death of his parents. The Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, kills, he's brainwashed by Hydra to kill Howard Stark and get the super soldier serum so Hydra could do their Winter Soldier program. And it was dark. And that was shown again near the end of the movie when Zemo showed that to, Cap, Iron Man, and Bucky. And boy, that was the darkest part of the movie. Like, I could hear everyone in the theater just gasp. Even my sister was like, oh no. It's like, wow. I saw it coming, but their deaths were super brutal. Like, Bucky, he basically punched Howard Stark's face in it. You could kind of see like him bleeding. I could have swore I saw his skeleton or whatever. I don't know. But the thing is, Bucky punched his face in basically and choked the living life out of his mom. So, I mean, when you could totally understand Iron Man's rage. You're seeing your parents die and the guy who killed them is right next to you. And then you ask your friend or who you thought your friend, you knew this and you didn't tell me. That moment is when I hated Captain America, because I'm like, dude, you knew about this since Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier happened before Age of Ultron. You could have told Iron Man, oh, by the way, that Winter Soldier, he killed your parents. At least by that time, by that time Tony Stark would have gotten over it, or at least forgiven Bucky, and they would have never, fought. But I blame Captain America. He was trying to protect Tony, and in a way he destroyed them. Murder of Tony's parents was way more riveting, way more emotional. I mean, come on, it had to be. That was the first time we've seen his parents murdered on screen. We've never seen that before. We've only heard that mentioned like Iron Man 2. Whereas the death of Bruce Wayne's parents is the most common thing. The only thing that's as common as that is Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Uncle Ben dying. So, all right, the next thing I want to talk about is number 7, the destruction of Metropolis versus the destruction of Sokovia. Now, this is one thing Batman v Superman got right that I wanted to see in Civil War. Okay, the beginning of Batman v Superman when they show the destruction of Metropolis again, but this time is in Bruce Wayne's point of view. I wish we saw that in Civil War, like the beginning with Bucky killing Tony Stark's parents. I wish the next scene they showed after that was the destruction of Sokovia from Baron Zemo's point of view, because all we hear is that his family died. So I mean, throughout the movie he's always like listening to his voice message answering machine of his wife saying I love you, and it didn't click at the time that he's listening to an old message until the very end. I was like, wait, why is that the same thing his wife has been saying, like, oh, she's dead, he's listening to her old message. So I would have actually liked to see that in the flashback in the beginning of the movie. I think that would have at least made some people like Zemo's more. I mean, like Zemo's character more, and that would have given his character and his villainy more of a purpose. So I think Marvel kind of missed out on that. They should have done that, and I think more people would have liked Baron Zemo. The next thing I want to talk about is the fight between Batman and Superman and Captain America and Iron Man. Now, Batman and Superman only fought once. That scene in Gotham, but it was so forced because the fight never needed to happen. Superman was only fighting Bruce Wayne or Batman because Lex Luthor told him to, and Superman knew he had to do that, otherwise his mom would die. I mean, so there was really no conflict. The only real conflict between Batman and Superman was when Superman crashed Batman's car and told him, next time they shine a light in the sky, don't go to it. The bat is dead, bury it. And Batman's like, do you bleed? You will. That was the only, and it was just badass lines. That's all. There wasn't any reason or motive. I thought that we were going to see Superman's ideals conflict with Batman. Like Superman, like, look, I don't like your methods. I don't like how you torture the truth or torture your victims. And Batman's like, well, I don't like your methods too. Like, I would like to see something like that, like in World's Finest Comics, but we never got that. So there was really no conflict between Batman and Superman, and the fight, I mean, people say the fight was good, but come on, guys. The fight was very one-sided. It was either Superman kicking Batman's ass, no matter what, even the armor Batman wore was nothing. Superman's kicking ass, or it was Batman kicking Superman's ass because of the kryptonite. It was completely one-sided. There was no like real hand-to-hand combat. And I know you guys were like, oh, of course, it's Superman. I'm like, that's the thing. I never understood the whole hype between Batman and Superman fighting in general, even in the comics and shows, because it's no contest. Superman wins unless Batman uses kryptonite. By that point, the fight isn't fair anymore. Captain America and Iron Man's fight is way better, hands down, because you have Captain America who can lift 2 tons, expert athlete. I mean, he's super soldier, excellent fighter. He's got skills. And then you got Tony Stark's Iron Man. He may not be a master at hand-to-hand combat, but he's also strong. His iron suit can lift more than Captain America. He's got beams. I mean, they fight to the death. And you can even see as Captain America's whooping the crap out of Iron Man, Iron Man's robot is telling him, look, you cannot beat him in hand-to-hand combat. But what Iron Man lacks, he gains so much in other areas, like in his arsenal, his strength. So that's why the fight is so good. I still prefer Captain America fighting with Bucky because, they're both like very skilled fighters. But Captain America Iron Man fight was just so much better. And everyone was on their seat because you didn't know who was going to die. Whereas Batman v Superman, I mean, when they were fighting, it was like, we already know Superman's not going to kill Batman. And Batman's not going to kill Superman. Because if you saw the trailers, you already knew they worked together in the end. Because the trailers really spoiled everything. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. Lois Lane versus Sharon Carter. All right, now this one is good. Now, a lot of people hated Lois Lane's character. I don't think there's a single person who defended Lois Lane. Like, she was in the movie for no reason. She was nothing but a damsel in distress from the beginning of the movie to the end. Whereas Sharon Carter was just a badass blonde. kicking ass with Captain America. Now, I compare both of these ladies because they're both love interest for the main character. Both Captain America and Superman are supposed to be Boy Scouts, right? Lois Lane is Superman's love interest. Sharon Carter is Captain America's love interest. And boy, I loved Sharon Carter since the first time I saw her in Winter Soldier. You know, I mean, I first saw her in the ABC TV show Revenge. So it was like, oh, cool, she's in MCU. And it also helps that she's very attractive. I personally find her more attractive than Amy Adams, who plays Lois Lane. But that's besides the point. The point is their characters. Lois Lane, her story was just really forced in the movie. That whole movie, she was just trying to find whose bullet did that bullet from Africa belong to. And it's like, oh, it belongs to Lex Luthor. Oh, Lex Luthor, you're bad. Whoop-de-doo, we all knew, the whole audience knew that before Lois Lane. It was like a no-shit Sherlock moment. Whereas Sharon Carter, I mean, with Sharon Carter, her role was a lot less than Lois Lane. Her whole point was really just to help aid Captain America in getting his team together. Like, I thought she was going to fight in the end. She didn't. But she just helped Captain America fight, gather his team. And she did take part in trying to fight Bucky, but that's really the only action sequence we saw. But you see, that's one thing I like about the Russo brothers. They show every character, they pay attention to every character until they're not needed anymore, you know? Like with Sharon Carter, like she wasn't important anymore after that point. Whereas Lois Lane, they were just shoehorning her throughout the whole movie. So yeah. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is the incidents in Batman v Superman versus the bombings in Civil War. Now, both movies are also very similar in that it begins with a terrorist attack that basically sets off the events of the movie. Like, you know, it's true that in a Civil War is the Sokovia attack on in Age of Ultron, Avengers Age of Ultron, that is the whole point of Civil War. But what really sets off things in motion is the explosion with Crossbones in Lagos, Nigeria. The main thing that really sets things going forward in the Sokovia Accords is the bombing in, I forgot where that was. I don't know if that was in Vienna, but it was the bombing that killed T'Chaka, so that is what really set off everything. And, yeah. So it was kind of basically similar to the event in Bat v Superman 2. Let's see. Also, another thing that was pretty similar here was the climax fight holding back in Batman v Superman. Batman and Superman, they were fighting. You can tell that Superman was holding back because all Superman had to do was just warp punch Batman, and Batman would be gone into smithereens. You know, so that's why the fight was very one-sided because, like I said, either Superman was winning or Batman was winning with kryptonite. And then also in the climax I almost said Avengers, and Captain America Civil War, all of them were holding back, you know, like because basically none of them wanted to kill each other. Like Captain America wasn't trying to kill Iron Man, you know, Hawkeye wasn't trying to kill Black Widow, and of course SpiderMan wasn't trying to kill. The only one who was out for blood was Black Panther, trying to kill Bucky, and failed. But yeah, that's about it. And but I have to say, between that fight, the airport fight in Civil War, and Batman v Superman fight, the airport fight was way more entertaining. Like, critics are calling it the best action set piece ever in a superhero movie, and I have to say it's right there in my top 3. So yeah, definitely. Another thing is the creation of the Justice League versus the decimation of Avengers. That's not really a similarity, as it is more of an opposite. The whole purpose of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice was to set up the Justice League by the end, basically. And the whole point of Civil War was basically the destruction of the Avengers. So I kind of like that, you know, the comparison, how it contrasts with that. You know, it's pretty cool. So yeah, and the next point is the pacing of the films. Now, I have to say one thing. Both Batman v Superman, both Dawn of Justice and Civil War have a lot going on in the movies. Like, there's a lot of scenes in Civil War. Like, I'm not even going to pretend like everything was just this one continuous story. It kept a consistent story, but there's a lot of scenes. Like, one point you'll see, you know, the new Avengers fighting in Nigeria. Then the next scene you'll see Tony Stark giving a presentation about like a new invention he made about your memories, storing your memories. And then the next scene you'll see, you know, Baron Zemo, or Helmut Zemo, whatever his name is, trying to, interrogate Hydra members. Then another scene, you know, then you see them together. Then you see Tony Stark, you know, meeting Peter Parker and everything. Then you see T'Challa and Black Panther. So there's a lot of different scenes in this movie, but they all flow nicely. One thing I do appreciate this movie is they do let you know every location you're in. Like if you're in Vienna, if you're in Bucharest, whatever. I mean, it's kind of funny though because the theater I went to see it in was like a theater for the blind and deaf. So it's like they had these glasses if you were hard of seeing or whatever, you can't see well. So it has like a caption. So anytime those big ass fonts came, I always got confused like, wait, is this for the blind people? But I've heard other people complain about or talk about the font. So I'm like, okay, it's part of the movie. I mean, it's more of a nitpick, but it did kind of feel weird because it was like these big ass bold white letters. So I was like, huh? But I liked it though because everybody can see it. I kind of hate it when there's the little font in the side corner that's like in Nigeria or in Europe or somewhere in the Middle East or whatever. I hate that. So I'm glad that it's in big letters, especially Queens. So yeah, and also the pacing in BvS in Batman v Superman shows a lot. Like it starts out in Africa too, and there's a lot of scenes from Batman's side, Superman's side, Lex Luthor's side. The problem is it doesn't flow right, and I won't get into all the nitty gritty because this video is already running very long. But the pacing is really, really off. Like especially the nightmare sequence, and then the Flash thing, and then what else? And I'm forgetting myself, but all of that is completely random. There is no explanation. We don't even know why or how he had a nightmare sequence, which is really a vision. And Flash came out of nowhere. Like that was super random. No explanation for that. And and nobody can justify that except if you're a hardcore comic book fan. But like I said, movies are not supposed to be only made for the fans. They're supposed to be made so that everyone else will understand them. And that's just the pathetic excuse, just like what I Hate Everything said when someone says, oh, it was made for the fans. Not really. The next point I want to talk about is the tone. Now, a lot of people criticize Zack Snyder on the way he tries to make everything dark and gritty. Like Batman, dark and gritty. That's true. That's always been Batman. But Superman is not dark and gritty. And Superman's been dark and gritty since Man of Steel, and a lot of people didn't like that. Also, a lot of old-time DC fans hated that too. And basically, in an interview, he said how the whole DCEU will be this dark and gritty tone consistently, which is bad because that leaves little room for creativity. If all of your superheroes, from Batman to Superman to Green Lantern, Flash, Aquaman, if they're all, and Wonder Woman, if they're all dark and dreary, then that's boring. But with the MCU, every superhero has their own genre, has their own tone. Ant-Man is a heist film. Iron Man is a kick-ass action movie with someone who's arrogant and has like one-liners, Captain America, was like a spy thriller, Basically, his movies are thrillers, especially the second and third movie from the Russo bros. Thor is supposed to be like this fantasy Lord of the Rings type of movie or whatever. Then you have Shield, Black Widow, Hawkeye, which is more espionage. Doctor Strange is coming out later this year, and the director for that, he directed horror movies. I think he did Poltergeist. Don't quote me on that, but he said how he's going to make the movie more of a horror-esque mystical and horror type of movie. And then you have Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a space opera. So you see how every movie is a different tone. Now you put them all together, and you have Civil War. Like the Russo brothers, Winter Soldier was pretty much a serious film. There were hardly jokes in that movie. There are a bit more jokes in Civil War than Winter Soldier, but it's not like jokey. It's not like a bunch of comedy like in Avengers Age of Ultron. Like there's only a few really comedic scenes, and it mainly revolves around Spider-Man and Ant-Man, because both of those characters are funny. Ant-Man was funny in his movie, and Spider-Man is a wisecracking superhero. It would be horrible if they tried to make them all serious, make them all dark, because they would lose their character. They would lose what makes them likable. Black Panther was serious, dark, and was filled with vengeance because that's how he was supposed to be. He was wise too. That's how he's always going to be. Black Panther never cracked a single joke, So yeah, he never cracked a single joke. So that's how he's supposed to do. You're supposed to give all the characters their own personality, but make it fit in the movie so it's not jarring, and don't make it all fit into one tone that is boring. All right, well, I've been rambling for a long time, so let me see. Got two more points to make. The next point is Superman being an alien versus Captain America being out of touch. You know, one thing that was very similar about both characters is they both misfits. Like, that's the most appealing thing about Captain America and Superman. You know, like Captain America, he's out of touch because he's from the 1940s. You know, he's been frozen for decades. So he wakes up in the future and he's just not the only person or the only two people that he knows from his past is Agent Carter, Peggy Carter, and his friend Bucky. And in Civil War, Peggy Carter's never shown, but she dies in the beginning. Think of old age or Alzheimer's or something. So the only friend he has is Bucky, which is weird. And then for Superman, Superman is an alien. He's not from this world. He's from Krypton, so he already feels like an alien. That and his superhuman strength. So both characters are definitely alienating their own world, but with Captain America, they really emphasize that a lot in the movies. I mean, they do emphasize that a lot in Man of Steel and BvS, so I won't fault, Zack Snyder for that. He actually did a good job in alienating Superman. So yeah. And the next point is Doomsday and Crossbones. Yeah, Doomsday and Crossbones. Now, there's actually nothing in common with Doomsday and Crossbones. The thing is, they're both shown for a very limited of time, and they're both underused. Now, a lot of DC fans were pissed off about Doomsday because, Doomsday is supposed to be the big bad villain of Superman. Like, he's the one that kills Superman, Death of Superman, which is a very important, saga or whatever. And they wasted him in Batman v Superman, just showed him in the very end, and you knew he was going to kill Superman, and yeah. And in Crossbones, now Crossbones is not as important of a villain as Doomsday is, but he is one of Captain America's big villains, along with Red Skull, Baron Zemo, and stuff. And that was the one thing I criticized this movie on. Really, is how they just underused Crossbones. Like, if you guys watch Winter Soldier, Rumlow, I think. Wait, what's it? No, that's his real name. What was his name in the movie? Crap, I forgot. No, what was it? Frank Grillo or Rumlow? Okay, it was Rumlow. My bad. Yeah, his character was Mark Rumlow. He was built up throughout the whole movie as this guy who was just jealous of Captain America because he always tried to get Cap, but Cap was always one step ahead of him in strength and everything. Sometimes he came close to beating out Cap, but Cap always had the edge. So it was always like this cat and mouse game, Cap always being ahead of him. And then the end, when he fights Sam Wilson or Falcon, he gets brutally injured. And then, he's going to be Crossbones. Like, they've been promoting him, showing him in pictures and trailers a lot. And then you see him and he only lasts in the first scene, then he dies. It like that was pretty underwhelming. I knew Crossbones wasn't going to be the main villain in this movie. I knew it was going to be Zemo. But I expected Crossbones to be like the main henchman of Zemo until like the very end. And Zemo's like, oh, I don't need you anymore. And maybe have him dispose or whatever, kind of like how he disposed the Winter Soldiers. I don't know, but that's how I always saw Mark Ruffalo. Or yeah, like even the Black Angry Nerd Andre, even he complained about that, saying how Crossbones was built up throughout Winter Soldier only to be killed off in the first scene of this. Now I know the Russo bros was trying to mimic the same thing they did with Batroc in Winter Soldier, but Batroc was a very minor villain. He was not built up at all in the first Avenger, in the first movie. He was just kind of like Scarecrow. But Crossbones, they did him dirty in this film. So yeah, both Crossbones and Doomsday were both done dirty, so I'm not even going to say which one is better than the other. So yeah, those are all my similarities so far about Batman v Superman and Captain America Civil War, and why Captain America Civil War was just done better. There are some points that I mentioned here that Batman v Superman did do better. A few, like the destruction of Metropolis. I wish they showed that from the point of view of Zemo in the beginning of Civil War. And other things like Doomsday and Crossbones, which I thought they were both underused. So, but majority of my points was basically Captain America's Civil War coming out on top. Now, and I wanted to make this video because a lot of people always say, or mainly the fanboys are saying, you can't compare these movies. The whole existence of Civil War and Batman v Superman is that they're both very similar. Even the producers admit that. So if they can compare it, why can't we, But yeah, that's all I want to say. So I want to see what you guys think. Leave your comments down below of any other similarities you have. Basically, I know I'm basically putting out this video right after Couch Tomato said he's going to do comparisons. But I actually came up with this before he announced it. So I don't want to hear anyone saying, oh, you got this from Couch Tomato, because no, I mean, everyone knows there's similarities between the movies. But yeah, so I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What other similarities do you have? And did you prefer Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice or Captain America: Civil War? And please, no fanboy wars in my comments. Like I don't tolerate that at all on my channel. So please, if anyone is going to be a fanboy, angry fanboy, and start, insulting me or anyone on the channel, you will be blocked. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, alright, that wraps it up. This very long video. I'm going to have a lot to edit. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more. I don't think I'm going to do another big review like this until Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them come out. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, swag out.